Well, hello. Today we're going to do some work on the Black Label Dragon kit of the M6, just an M6 heavy tank. What really sparked my interest in this, playing World of Tanks online. They had some tanks in there that I just had never seen, I'd never heard of. It seemed like, wow, an American heavy tank, that'd be kind of something fun to do, fun to get into, but there wasn't a kit available at the time. In fact, many of the tanks on World of Tanks, there are not kits available for. When this one came out, I was really excited and I wanted to build this. Till I looked at the price. $70. Wow, that's a lot of money. You know, I'm a real tightwad, and $70, that's pretty steep for me. Then I started to see some of the reviews online about the build, and people really dogged this kit, and for a good reason. There was some real issues with the kit. I guess if it was a $20 or $25 kit, it wouldn't be a problem. But the fact of the matter is, you're spending a lot of money on a kit that's incomplete. For one thing, it doesn't have all the Pioneer tools it should. The siren on the fender is woefully molded, so we're going to have to replace that. There's a weld seam on the turret that we're going to have to replicate. There's a few other issues. The 37mm gun on it, I think it's way too small, and you'll see that when I do a comparison with the one that I'm going to use. So anyway, I'm excited to build this kit regardless of all of the bad publicity it's had. I really want to see what I can do with it. So I mentioned earlier that I thought the 37mm cannon looked awfully small, and you can see here, I mean, this is just, it's almost the size of a 50 cal. It's tiny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute this particular gun here. This is a 37mm out of an Academy M3 kit, and I like the size of it. It scales out a whole lot better. So as you can see, it's not quite as long. The dimensions are a little bit different, but I'm going to use this as my coaxial 37mm. So when I put the turret together, it's fine that we have this seam, because what we need to do is there's actually a rather thick weld bead on the actual tank. So I'm going to replicate that by using some strip styrene. As you can see here, I've done this one side. What we'll do is just apply some glue and put the strip styrene on the rest of this. That's the first step. We've got it all the way around now. I think I used, it's 0.10 thickness, but I think it's 0.10 by 30 or 40. I don't know, and I don't know that it really matters what we're going to do next with it. So it's not perfectly straight, but I think we're going to be fine with what we're going to do. You see how smooth this turret is? Well, cast turrets weren't smooth like this, so we're going to add some cast texture. We're going to use some xylene to make our texture. The reason I use xylene is, well, because I have it, and I use it for other things as well. So you could use Mr. Surfacer, you could use Tamiya glue, whatever floats your boat, but this is what I use. The first step here in making the weld seam will be to put some of the xylene on that thin styrene. Let it cook for just a minute. Then I'm going to take my hobby knife and start working it in the shape of what a weld bead would look like. This requires several applications of the xylene. I'm sure there's easier ways to do this, but like I said, I've got this stuff. It's the way, it's just the way I do it. You can see the results. I have used putty before. I've used Milliput, and I've used red automotive putty, which they all work fine. This is just how I chose to do this one. So you can see how that's turned out so far. Now to add texture, I'm going to do something very similar. I'm going to put down some of this xylene on the side here. And and I'm going to let it work its magic of melting the plastic for just a few seconds. And then as it starts to dry, I'm just going to move my brush around like this. That's not giving it a lot of texture, but it's giving it some. If you wanted to give more texture, obviously there's other ways to do that. The Mr. Surfacer is really good at it. But if you look at the real tank, which was at Aberdeen, there's several pictures of it online. Of course, most of the pictures you see now have several layers of rust and paint on it, but some of the earlier pictures of it, you can see there's definitely a texture to it, just not a very deep texture. I know, we're just want to make sure I'm happy with the results there. So hopefully you can see how that's textured. So here's the finished result on the weld seam. It took me about 30 minutes to get it this far. You can see I still need to put some texture on the back of the turret. And obviously I've used several coats of xylene to get it soft enough. The one problem with the xylene is it does stay soft for a while, and your plastic starts to revert back to more of a smooth texture. So this is about the 4th or 5th time I've gone over it, just to try and keep a little bit of texture in it. So on the top, I have to be a little bit careful because there's some of these areas, and the whole reason I haven't put all of the parts on yet is, remember that I'm just trying to get the cast texture on the cast part of the turret, and that there were some things that were added on afterwards that don't have the cast texture. So that's why I'm doing it at this stage here. So I'm trying not to get the ventilator and whatever this cover is here. I don't want to put texture on that. So anyway, I kind of have to work it carefully. Okay, we're ready to put on a coat of OD. This is just Testors Model Master OD. I want a nice lighter OD. Early war is what I'm after, that early war OD look. And I thin mine with lacquer thinner, a good quality lacquer thinner, but I just use lacquer thinner. Nice thing is it dries a lot quicker that way. I don't have any problem spraying it through my Iwata airbrush. So I'm taking some Dunkel Gelb from Testors Model Master, and I'm just giving it a light scrubbing now that my paint's dry. Just a very light dry brushing to bring out some of these details. And you can see how the texture, hopefully you can see how that texture turned out. Whole lot better than the smooth cast turret. I don't think it's overly done. You can be the judge of that for yourself, but there you go. So I've got the base coat of paint on the turret, and I had a couple of choices here. I was trying to decide whether or not to use a 90mm gun like my M6 has in World of Tanks.
Here in our M6.
Apparently there was one of the T1 E1 models of this tank that they were going to fit a 90mm to, and they just never did. And I thought, well, if I'm going to build this as it was hypothetically in combat, they never did make it overseas, but what if, a what if scenario, I had thought about taking the coax gun off because it was really redundant and pretty much worthless, and putting a 50 cal in its stead. That would have made a lot more sense if it was going to be in combat, and keep the 76 millimeter gun. Again, I couldn't quite come to grips with all of that. But one of the things that I don't think anyone else has done, and I thought would be kind of fun, is to build this as a Bond Tour M6. Because once they were canceled, the tanks that were already built, the 40 that were built, went out on bond tours during World War II. And so that's what I've decided to do. So I fit it with the 37 millimeter coax gun and the 3-inch main gun, and I'm going to doll it up to make it look like it's on a bond tour.